Chapter 26. Bea. Come in, my brother yelled from inside his office. I twisted the knob and shoved the door open, irritation still brimming in my system. Room. To leave Will. When he'd stripped and headed for the shower, I'd thought I was going to disobey my alpha for the very first time in my life. Room. I'd made it out, but just barely. What is so important you needed me in here at 8 in the morning? I asked, as I walked further into his office. I froze before slowly sinking onto the chair in front of his desk. What about them now? He blew out a deep breath. Since I killed Conrad, I'm technically their new alpha. He speared me with an annoyed look. You know I don't want to be their alpha. I have my hands full with just one pack. I reclined in my chair with a shrug. Okay, then make their beta the alpha and it's not that simple. How can I trust someone who worked so closely under Conrad? How can I give someone I don't know a pack that large and powerful? I sat up straight, my gut pinching deep inside me. Okay, then what are you? He watched me carefully, and I knew I wasn't going to like what came out of. My eyes widened, but that was the only part of me that moved. That and my brain as it swirled and twisted violently. There were 1,000 thoughts crowding my head, but only one made its way past my stiff lips. You're sending me away. He jerked backward. What? No. Because of Peyton. Bea, what are you talking about? The small flame left inside my cold chest burned bright as I looked up at him. Again. Is this because I killed her? Are you sending me away from my home? Because I didn't try to break her spine first like the rest of them? His eyes widened as he sat forward. What?
Bea, no.
That's not it at all. Then why are you sending me away? I yelled. You don't think I see the way you look at me? The way they all look at me. Abraham shook his head and walked around his desk to crouch in front of me. Bea, if I look at you any different, it's because I regret what happened yesterday. I should have been the one to confront Peyton. I should have been the one to take her down. That never should have fallen to you, and I'm sorry. My eyes watered as I stared at my brother. Then why do I have to leave? He reached out to grab both my hands. Bea, this isn't a punishment, this is a hell. You're a better alpha to this pack than I am. This is a chance for you to become what you always should have been. For myself. When I opened my mouth to finally respond, a knock on the door interrupted me. Abraham stood up straight as I sniffed the tears back. He crossed the room to answer the door, but I didn't turn to see who it was as I tried to pull myself.
Bobby.
You're just in time, my brother said. With one last sniff, I spun in my seat to watch the strange man enter Abby's. Enough. Bobby, this is my beta, Beatrice. Beatrice, this is the beta of the Charlotte pack. I stood from my seat as he approached me. He held out his big hand and I shook it automatically. Nice to meet you. He nodded. It's a pleasure to meet the famous female beta of the Asheville pack. I forced a smile on my face as I gently removed my hand from his grip. You are where I'm from. I kept the brittle grin on my face as Abraham approached us. You two have seat. We have some things to discuss. Began as he sat down. He was an awful alpha and the whole pack suffered because of him. Abby's wide eyes met mine before we both turned to Bobby. Is that right? I knew from the tone of his voice that he was thinking the same thing I was. That no beta, no matter how awful their alpha is, should ever betray them. Person they could trust implicitly. But this was exactly what Abraham wanted to hear, right? That this beta wasn't aligned with Conrad. That he could be trusted with running the Charlotte pack. Which meant he didn't need me and I didn't need to leave my family and pack. Yes, we're all glad he's gone, Bobby said. I turned to Abby with a hopeful expression on my face, but he just shook his.
No.
Of course not. In fact, I came here today to see what I could do to help with the peaceful transfer of power to our new alpha. That's very helpful, Abraham said as his eyes darted to me. And now you can meet your new alpha in person. The room fell silent before Bobby cleared his throat and spoke. Pardon. Abraham gestured toward me. Beatrice is going to be taking over the Charlotte. The hairs on my arm stood on end as Bobby slowly turned to look at me. Emmet. Finally he turned back to Abby. Oh, we assumed you'd make a Charlotte pack. Member the new alpha. Abraham shook his head. It would be irresponsible of me to put a wolf I don't know in charge of a pack that size. The tension was thick in the room as the sound of silence almost burst my eardrums. Finally, Bobby cleared his throat and spoke again. Well, please let me know if there's anything I can do to help, he said as he looked from me to Abraham, said as he walked toward the door, clearly dismissing us. If you'd like to have some breakfast downstairs, I'm sure there's more than enough food. Bobby shot him a smile that somehow looked wrong on his face. Thanks, but I think I'll just head back to Charlotte. I've got to let everyone know about our new alpha and make sure we get the estate ready for her arrival. My heart fell to the pit of my stomach like a 10-pound bowling ball. Tonight? I had to leave tonight? Bobby's smile grew but managed to not look any happier. Perfect. We'll be ready for her. The Charlotte Beta swung that smile my way one more time before he disappeared into the hall. Abby closed the door behind him and turned to me. Why do I have to leave tonight? I asked before he had a chance to speak. Rival pack without a leader. That ball in my stomach rolled violently as I thought about the consequences. What about my position here? We can have Wes fill in for you while you're gone. He sighed. Of course you don't have to stay if you don't want to. You can go there for a couple weeks, settle the pack and find yourself a replacement if you want. He sighed again and grasped my upper arms. I told you this is your chance to be everything you're capable of being. I looked up at him, my eyes watering again as I realized how much more I was about to lose. But what if I just want to be your beta? Always come back home. I breathed in his familiar scent and held him back. When I'd finally wrestled my tears away, I took a step away from him. I guess, I croaked before clearing my voice, I guess I should start packing. The words left such a bitter taste in my mouth. Too much was changing and I wasn't at all prepared. My whole world was crumbling around me with no way to make it stop. Abraham leaned over and kissed the top of my head just like he'd done since. I pulled away from him again. He shrugged. I figured I'd go down and help you get settled. You can't leave the pack without the both of us. Wes can handle things for one night. I shook my head and took another step away from him. No, they need you too. His jaw clenched as he watched me back toward the door. Then I'll send Matthias with you. That's really not necessary. It's not up for debate. I sighed and let my tense shoulders fall. Fine. He nodded and turned back toward his desk. I'll let him know to be ready to leave after dinner. Hall. Once there, I squeezed my eyes closed and tried to come to terms with the path my life seemed to be on now. I was no longer the beta of the Asheville pack. For the foreseeable future, I'd be the alpha of the Charlotte pack. I'd be on my own. I'd be away from and I'd have to do all that while nursing a giant original werewolf-sized hole in my heart. Realizing I was wasting precious minutes away from him, I rushed back down the fully dressed again, using a towel to dry his damp mess of hair. I swallowed hard and shut the door behind me. Now that I was back here with him, all I could think about was how much longer I had. Was it minutes? An hour. I needed to know how long my heart was going to continue to beat for. Hi, he said finally. What did your brother have to say? I cleared my throat and pulled away from the door. He's made me the alpha of the Charlotte pack. I shrugged. I leave tonight. Alone. Abraham is sending Matthias with me. Will's gaze shuddered before he turned away. That's a city I've never had the chance to visit. My heart leapt into my throat, where it continued to beat out of control. Did he want to see Charlotte now? Did he want me to ask him to come with me? Did I have the courage to say those words? He hung his wet towel on a hook before turning back to me. I knew then it was now or never. Will's heart pounded hard once before it stopped altogether. What? He whispered. You can visit Charlotte now, I repeated. You can come with me. I don't get it. I exploded, the words gushing out of my mouth without any kind of filter. I get that you've lost a lot of people in your life and you're sick of seeing your loved ones die, but does that mean you just stop letting people love you? Isn't 30 good years with me better than none at? Will crossed the room in the blink of an eye, his hands wrapping tight around my biceps. Do you know what it's like to love someone with every fiber of your being and watch them die? He seethed. I notched my chin in the air and met his gaze. Are you talking about your? I'm talking about you, he snarled. I cannot afford to love you anymore than I do right now. I cannot watch you die. I wouldn't survive losing you. I stood there speechless, my heart thundering somewhere in my aching chest as I stared at him, finally taken a breath. When he looked back, there was a determination in His gaze I'd never seen before, and I knew what came next. He caught my chin with his fingers and guided my lips to his. Will kissed me softly for a brief moment before he pulled away. Goodbye, Bea. Will's steps were slow and deliberate as he walked out of my life. There were 100 things I wanted to do, 1,000 things I wanted to say, but I kept still and quiet as he left. Into the hall, taking all the oxygen in the room with him. I struggled to breathe as I stood there, crumbling piece by piece. Finally my knees buckled. I curled into a ball and let the tears leak out of my eyes unchecked. In the course of 2 days I'd managed to lose everything. My pack. My family. Now Will. It was all too much, and for the first time in my life I didn't know how I'd get back up. Epilogue. Will. I'm going to miss you. I'll miss you more. I tuned out her bickering sisters and focused on the only person I cared about. Bea was faced away from me, but I could still tell how tensed her shoulders were. Sisters and brother all take turns pulling her into their arms. She kept rolling her eyes, but I knew how much she loved them, and I knew it was breaking her heart to leave. But the pain she felt now, the pain I felt right then, was only an echo of what we'd feel later, when we'd had years to grow deeper in love, when we knew each other better than we knew ourselves, when our souls had become inexplicably bound. That's when it would hurt the worst. That was the pain I was trying to save us both from. My hand wandered to my chest, and I rubbed at the ache that settled there, the courage to sever the tie that bound us. I'd spent the rest of the day as a wolf, running circles around Packlands, only returning when I'd heard her heartbeat get louder. That meant she was outside the lodge. That meant she was getting ready to leave. I crept forward, but the moment her icy blue eyes swung my way I froze. There. Her to make me out, but that didn't stop the hair from rising on my arms. Didn't stop my heart from beating so loud she could probably hear it too. When she finally ripped her gaze away, I took my first real breath in. What? Over to her Ford Mustang and climb into the driver's seat. She had the engine fired up within seconds, and then she drove off. Just like that she was gone. My chest hurt worse the farther she got, but I stayed where I was. I was determined to save her, to save myself from the heartache I knew awaited us. When she finally drove out of view, I shook my head and looked back at the never felt like I belonged here. But I'd belonged to Bea for longer than should have been allowed, and I'd have to learn to live with that. Somehow. Believing in